Alright, hello, welcome back. So, today, what I'll be touching upon is something that is on my mind for very long, right? And this is the idea of evil in itself. So, today, what I'll be discussing is what I think evil generally is, and how I think evil works, and the framework, or rather, the principle that to me seems to be the true root of evil. So, in any case, if we were to think in terms of evil, right, we can say that there is two ways to think of evil. One is that the evil as in an evil person. If I were to do evil things, am I an evil person? Or you can even separate out into evil person and evil acts. And I think that to a certain extent, for human beings, we, in some sense, you can say that psychologically we need these two to be separate, because human being also have a issue on itself, or rather something that we have to adhere to, which is when it comes down to human nature. One of the key human nature principle is that we are the heroes of our stories. So what does this mean? We are the heroes of our stories. In general, if you were to think back to any circumstances, even in the situation of, let's say you have an enemy, right? If there's somebody that you just generally do not like, and you can say that, well, the feeling probably is mutual, the person don't like you back. The thing is, you always see it from the perspective of, well, this person is this like however bad, and you basically is the justified person, right, to act and feel in a certain way, even though you can say that there are certain acts that might not be in line with an ideally good person, right? So we're not talking in terms of evil act, we're talking in terms of good person. So in order for you to be a good person, you can say that, like, well, just like how there's evil person, then there's also good acts. And you can say that, well, if you're not doing the good acts and you're doing opposite of the good acts, then are you really a good person, right? So one example is that, well, good people by nature, or rather stereotypically, is that we are supposed to be kind to people. I'm not using we as if saying that I'm a good person. I'm just using hypothetically by saying a good person stereotypically probably would have to be perceived as kind to other people. And if you were to dislike and hate somebody with no just cause, then you can say that, like, well, it goes against the idea of being kind. So in some sense, maybe you are not a good person. You may not necessarily be an evil person because of that, but well, in some sense, that by going along with the principle that we are the heroes of our own stories, you can say that, well, most people would perceive themselves to be good. And of course, you can say that, like, well, what about villains, right? What about people who justify things such as, I'm gonna do bad acts, and the reason why I'm gonna do bad acts is because it's for the greater good, right? I'm teaching people a lesson in order for them to learn from my bad acts to not be so gullible. So if anything, I'm actually doing them a service. And these few techniques of rationalizing the evil acts is something that I will touch upon later, right? But the whole idea is that even in that situation, the person might accept that he's an evil person, but his interpretation of the terminology of what evil actually is, and the terminology of somebody who you can say that, like, quote unquote is good, or rather the victim of the story who demonized the other person by calling them evil, is two different definition. Although you can say that you can go up to the dictionary and read up on a different the definition, but generally for human being, right, going back to mirroring, is that we form our own understanding and definition of words. And you can even say that contextually, we might even change definitions here and there to suit our needs as and when we require it. So for example, if let's say somebody did a certain evil act to us, they lied to us, they manipulated us, or they tricked us, and they scammed us, we can deem evil to be a term that is derogatory and generally negative. However, if at some point we are forced to commit an evil act, so for example, if let's say like this is person A, then this is you, and then this is person B, right? So this is you, A, and B, and A have a gun to your head and say that if you do not shoot B, I will shoot you. So now in some sense, right, you are forced to kill B. Then in some sense, now I have to kill B to save my own life. So now I have committed an evil act. And in some sense, you can say that like, yeah, the act is evil, but you can see that in this situation, you would probably rationalize it as, well, it's a necessity, right? The act, although it's an evil act, but you would downplay the evilness of it. And of course, downplaying evilness of it in actual fact is rationalization. And part of what this video can potentially be defined as is, how do we rationalize evil? So even in this situation alone, right? I mean, most people, if we were to be in a courtroom, or we were to judge a story, or we are passing judgment on the idea of this A, U, and B, we would see it from the perspective of, well, I can't necessarily punish you for what you did, because I can sort of understand if I'm in the same boat and a gun to my head is my survival versus another person's survival, I'll probably kill the other person, right? But the way that I see it is that at the end of the day, the whole idea why the person separates it as killing this person to be an evil act is because they don't want to deem themselves as an evil person. But the way I see it is that this, regardless, there's no such thing as evil person or evil act. Evil is evil in itself. And even if someone puts a gun to your head and tell you to shoot the other person, then you can say that like the whole, are you evil for pulling the trigger? I would say that yes, although you have a reason, because at some level you can understand it from the point of, you are actively choosing B's life over your own life. So what is the justification, or what is the value of your life over B's life, other than, well, emotional bias? Because at the end of the day, for animals, by nature, is we all seek to survive. Going back to the three three things that reptilian mind is concerned about is survival, procreation, and sustenance. And in some sense, you can say that like, yeah, it's extremely logical for somebody to choose their own life over another person, but again, it doesn't discount the evil act. So another principle that I want to introduce when it comes to understanding evil is a core psychological principle concept that I think heavily controls the human animal. And this is the sense of reciprocation. Whenever I share any sort of knowledge when it comes to, or principle when it comes to influence, in actual fact, I just realized I didn't put a off over here. So let me just put this in, sense of reciprocation. I may be a little bit of like dyslexia, I can't even pronounce that words. But in any case, the whole idea of sense of reciprocation and how it's so integral in terms of influence, even going back to the idea of when I shared about the sense of importance, right? You're giving the sense of importance to the other person. You're giving the sense of importance to the other person so that essentially they'll give you a currency, so-called a currency that they owe you one, that most people will fulfill. The reason why they fulfill it, not because they're obligated to, but because they're heavily influenced by this human principle or human nature of sense of reciprocation. So sense of reciprocation is the healthy idea of, if people were to do good things for us, we will do good things for them back. And it's not so much of like, if they were to do good things for us, then like, we are ideally, maybe we should, or anything, right? It's actually a strong emotional drive that will actually feel like, okay, there's something wrong in the universe if I do not reciprocate and return the favor. So which is why whenever somebody were to buy us lunch, if we go out with our friends, and then one of them decided to pay for us, we'll feel like, no, I have to pay you back. if you think in terms of logic, right, why does that line of reasoning make sense? Because you can say that, wouldn't it be better, if we are talking in terms of just pure logic with the absence of emotion, for us to enjoy the benefit of somebody actually paying resources for our benefit? But the human animal don't work purely on logic alone, and it's this emotional, I would say emotional principle that decides that no, we can't just let somebody waste resource on us, right? Them wasting their resources or them spending their resources for our benefit, which doesn't benefit them, is inherently unfair, and therefore I must pay this person back. So which is why whenever you have a sense of importance, keep in mind, sense of importance give the other person warm fuzzy feeling, right? The person would feel an obligation to so-called quote unquote pay you back. Of course, they won't think in terms of like, well, I have such a good conversation with Elon, I'm gonna have to pay him back by buying him something. It doesn't work like that. But the whole idea is that they will be more susceptible to doing the things that you requested, because, well, they will see it as like, well, I like Elon, right? And the reason why I like Elon is because, like, Elon listened to my story. But of course they don't think of it that way, right? A lot of this sense of reciprocation and a lot of things that I share about tends to be subconscious by nature. It's hidden from our conscious mind unless we actually actively go dig for them, we go ponder, and we go obsess about them to a certain extent. So which is why, again, the sense of importance works, because it works on in the terms of subconscious. But the idea of the sense of reciprocation is that, again, it focuses on good, right? If somebody were to do good things for us, we'll feel like we need to do good things back to them. And you can even say that in this tracks all the way back to early civilization. I think the earliest known civilization to trade, if I'm not wrong, is like Sumeria. And the idea is, if you think in terms of trade, even in the idea of you buying things online, right? So let's say if you were to go to eBay, is a very good example because it's peer-to-peer, and it's not like a merchant to seller, a merchant to buyer. But if you think in terms of eBay, the idea should be you fill up an order, and then you send me the money, then I send you garbage. But in actual fact, like, I didn't send the money, right? What I actually send you is like a check that eventually will bounce. So I'm tricking you in some sense. I'm sending you a check that will bounce, and you are sending me garbage, which is not what I paid for. So ideally, if let's say we are talking in terms of human being, we are not controlled by this sense of reciprocation. This is the logical conclusion of what the system of eBay probably is going to be. But it turns out that people actually fulfill and people actually keep their word. Because again, people need to see themselves as the hero of their story, right? They are not going to see themselves as, I'm going to actively go out to cheat people, unless they are able to justify this cheating, right? So even, again, when it comes to villains, they are not going to see their acts as just nonsensical evil acts. They're going to see it as, it's an act for the greater good. Even in the example of, if we are talking in terms of movie concept, we are talking in terms of Batman the Dark Knight, right? The idea that you have Joker, who put, this is a terrible Joker, but he puts 2 boats, and one is with civilians and one is with prisoners. And the idea is that he wants to put this social experiment to prove that people are going to do evil acts for their self-interest. And the whole idea is that if the civilian boat don't blow up the prisoner boats before the prisoner boat blows up the other boat, then, well, you can say that there's an incentive to live, right? Because you have to blow the other person up before the other person blow you up. And if both of you don't blow each other up within a time frame, I'll blow both of you up. So there's always that time pressure, right? It's inevitable that you're gonna die. The only way for you to live is for you to kill the other. Then of course the scene is in itself also quite interesting, because you can actually see the point of view of the 2 different things, right? And to a certain extent, it will go forward into the things that I will touch upon. But in any case, the whole idea is that the sense of reciprocation controls things such as good. So if someone do good things for us, we feel like it's obligated for us to do good things for them, which again, this cuts both ways, right? The sense of reciprocation is actually a double-edged sword, because this also goes with people doing bad things to us. Whenever people do bad things to us, we feel like it's obligated for us to return the favor. So this comes down to revenge story, and because people don't really realize how much this sense of reciprocation controls them, and one of the way that potentially I can show you how much it actually influence your decision making skills is that you look at the famous movie John Wick. Right, the story of John Wick is basically there's this gangster that killed John Wick's dog, and John Wick happened to be a retired assassin, and then the trilogy of John Wick is basically John Wick killing multiple people, right? But the idea is that it stems from the original incident of his dog being killed by somebody. And whenever we watch John Wick, we do not look at it from the perspective of like, wow, John Wick is just killing all these people. Then of course they have to be framed as bad guys, because again we have to see ourselves as the hero of the stories. And if John Wick is framed in a way of that we cannot resonate with it, and we cannot find certain similarities of ourselves between ourselves and John Wick, then the nonsense will be the movie will be nonsense for us. Generally, this is why whenever we watch cartoons, cartoons still sort of make sense, is because we are able to relate to the cartoon characters to a certain extent, right? Because if we were to see it from an objective view, cartoons by nature should be nonsense. So in any case, John Wick goes around and kill all these people, and we do not see it as John Wick is evil, mainly because it comes down to the idea of he started this journey because somebody killed his dog. And of course we also measure, right, wow, we ourselves, we have dogs, we have animals, and how close we are with those animals, and the amount of pain that is caused from this action of killing a dog causes so much emotional pain that it justifies John Wick to kill 3 movies worth of people without us feeling that like John Wick is an evil person. If anything, we might even see John Wick as a tragic character, that he's forced to kill all these people and all the other things, right? So this is, again, sense of reciprocation influencing us on how we actually perceive certain events. So now that you understand sense of reciprocation will come back later on. But generally, when I think in terms of why do people do evil acts, well, not so much of why do people do evil acts, because it's quite clear, right? If let's say people do evil acts, it's because you can say that evil acts tends to yield a greater return. So if let's say I'm going to be ethical, then you can say that, well, I can only work in the bounds of rules and regulation. But if I'm willing to break rules and regulation and establish ethical consideration, so for example, if I'm somebody who peddles drugs, yes, I can earn a lot of money. It's illegal, but essentially you can say that the ethical consideration is that it ruins life. But the idea is that, well, if I'm able to breach this, I'm able to overcome this need for being good and working within the rules, then you can say that I get a better returns. So the reason why people do evil acts at the end of the day is that, well, they get something out of it, potentially more than if they were to do good acts. But at the end of the day, because they still need to justify that they are a good person deep down inside. So how do human beings, or rather I'll put it in a way, how does good people justify doing evil acts? So in one sense, you can say that inevitability. Wow, I don't even know if I spelled this correct. Inevitably. Oh man, there's a chance that this is being spelled incorrectly. You can say that inevitable. In some sense, we can see certain acts as inevitable, right? So for example, if there is a gold bar, let's say right now, you are walking in a forest, okay, and maybe this forest is not in any, maybe you are overseas, right? You're overseas, you are climbing mountains, etc., and you come across a piece of diamond the size of a tangerine on the path in front of you. And you can say that, well, because you are overseas and maybe you are in a country where law enforcement is not so honest, and keep in mind that you are out in the wilderness, so even if you were to take this and return it to the police, they are unable to track the real owner, because, well, it's in the wilderness, right? How are they able to identify the true owner of this diamond the size of a tangerine? So now you have a consideration. Do you keep this diamond, or do you, well, in some sense, do the right thing by giving this to the law enforcement, the police, right? And you can probably think in terms of like, okay, if I give it to the police, if they are corrupted, they're just gonna pocket it anyway. So the whole idea is that the inevitability, somebody is going to pocket from this. Even if you choose not to do anything, you walk away, another person who comes after you, who sees this diamond, might just choose to pocket the diamond anyway. So it's inevitable that somebody have to benefit from this. So it might as well be me. Is the act correct? Am I right and justified for keeping the diamond? You can argue that, like, no one is here to claim it, so in some sense, is there any sort of ownership of this diamond? Well, you can think in terms of who will willingly throw away a diamond the size of a tangerine, right? We're not talking in terms of like you go mountaineering and then you come across this mineral that within it contains a tangerine. It's just a processed, refined diamond the size of a tangerine on the path in front of you. So clearly somebody have refined this to the shape of a diamond, and well, basically it belongs to somebody. That's what I'm trying to say, right? And you can say that because you value this diamond, because of the monetary value of this diamond, it makes sense that whoever owns this diamond would also miss it for the same thing. Then of course we'll also try to justify, well, if somebody owns this diamond, they probably is so filthy rich that they do not really need this diamond. So again, what's wrong with me keeping the diamond, right? And you can even say that this diamond is better for me than the other person. Then this goes down to principle 3 that I'll share later. But the whole idea is that principle 1 is inevitability. So the idea is that, well, if somebody's going to benefit from it anyway, then I'm going to benefit from it. It might as well be me, right? So inevitable. This is one of the ways that human beings actually justify doing evil acts, such as if we come across money on the street, then it's like, okay, well, if I were to give it to the police, they're unable to find the owner of this $1,000 bill, then what they're going to do is that they're just going to probably go into lost and found. Then eventually, well, once it runs its time, then probably, it will be going into the pocket of the police, right? Not the police officer himself, but maybe the organization, because they can't find the owner of this $1,000. Which again, you can say that if I ignore it, the other person is going to come across it and just pick it up anyway. And then, like, what's the point that I do not pocket this $1,000? It's inevitable. It might as well be me. So principle number 2. Principle number 2, in some sense, is I can't believe I can't remember principle number 2. But maybe I will just touch on this principle first. The core of what I want to share today, anyway. Right? This principle. While I think in terms of can I actually remember the true principle number 2, right? Maybe if it comes to me, then I will share it later. But the important thing that what I truly believe to be the root of evil is the idea of deserving. And the idea and principle of deserving is the thing that I can't get out of my mind for these past few days. It just keep clouding my mind, and you're like, hey, maybe this is how it works, this is how evil, this is what evil actually is. The idea of deserving is always the idea of righting a wrong and balancing the scale. You can say that deserving works on the principle of reciprocation, right? Because the reciprocation is that if a bad have been done to me, then I need to do a certain back. I need to return a certain favor of evilness. But you can see that reciprocation, when you corrupt reciprocation in that way, you can actually start to justify a lot of evil acts. So one example that I can give is this. Imagine if right now you like a girl. I know it's hard to imagine, right? If let's say you're a girl, then you can think in terms of like, well, I like a guy. If the person that you like romantically, and you can say that you put emotional attachment to it, you spend some form of emotional energy to actually fall in love with them, to actually think about them, but they rejected you. So you can say that to a certain extent, they have created a certain level of hurt in you. because of rejection. It doesn't matter about like why they rejected you. Do you actually think that when people try to justify their evil acts, they actually think in terms of like why people do certain things? Based on my understanding of human being is that we judge each other based on the action of the other person, but when it comes down to ourselves, we'll always judge ourselves based on intention. So we won't think in terms of the intention of other person, why the other person is doing this. What we tend to do, or rather what human beings tend to do, is that like, wow, this person is the only reason why this person does this is because this person is an asshole. Which, by the way, that line of thinking is feelings in nature, right? Because it's about putting equivalence. There is no equivalence between doing a certain act and being an asshole, but the whole idea about feelings in nature is that it is what it is, right? So it's equivalence. If you do this act, you are an asshole. I don't have to come up with an equation to explain it. I don't have to come up with an equation to prove it. By the nature of feelings, it is what it is. So in any case, going back to the example, imagine if this person have just rejected you. So now this person have caused a certain amount of hurt in you. And in some sense, you can say that depending on maturity level, objectively, we are talking in terms of pure logic, what you should do is move on. What's the point, right? The person probably have their reason to reject you. Okay, it can be external reasons such as it's just not the right time. There's a family issue, right? Maybe one of her family members passed away, and then she's just in an emotional state that she's not able to healthily be in a relationship. She's not thinking about a relationship. She's grieving right now, right? Or it can be issues down to you because you're a creepy person. You've done some creepy things. Probably like you stick around her too long. You stare at her for too long. When you guys are talking, you find that it's, for some reason, your brain decided that, you know what, I'm going to grab her arm right now, and then you done some creepy things, and obviously she's going to reject you because, well, you're creepy. So it can be external, it can be things that's not even related to you, or it can be things that is related to you. But the whole idea is that we don't think in terms of that. We think in terms of like, I have been hurt, I have been wronged. And the whole idea of deserving is that, well, now it justifies me for doing certain acts of evil. Of course, we don't think in terms of this way. We think in terms of what? I am going to get revenge on this girl. I am going to find some ways to hurt her the way that she hurt me. And this is not a unique, or this is not like a niche type of thinking, right? I think that's pretty common, especially when human beings are growing up, right? You're going through your teen phases. It's like, wow, this person have hurt me, now I must find some way to hurt the other person back. Or even in some sense that if even at the spot, right, at the point of rejection, you can say that if somebody rejected you, then there are situations where people would fly off the handle and then say that like, hey, you're not even that good looking anymore. You're not even that good looking anyway. You're ugly. You're this. You're that. Like, I can't believe like you have the guts to actually reject me. Like, who do you think you are? The whole idea is think in terms of that, right? Insulting another person, you can say that it's not an act of what a kind and good person is, in order for them to retain the idea of, I'm still a good person, essentially. I'm still the hero of my story. I'm not the villain, right? When I watch a movie, I'm the main character. The main character doesn't go around and hurting people, right? I don't think that we saw there is ever a movie about from the perspective of a bully. If a movie like that exists, probably it's going to have a redemption arc of the bully realizing that, oh, this is wrong or something like this, or they'll show some backstory of the bullies being abused, like physically or mentally abused by the family member, so that you feel a little bit of the pity for the bully, right? So, but the whole idea is always this idea of deserving. And the reason why I put it in the sense of this is how human beings justify evil is because I fundamentally think, in my opinion of this, is that this, although this is what I observe, this doesn't make sense. Evil in itself is evil, right? If the act itself is evil, if the person itself is evil, there is nothing that you can use to justify evil. And of course, maybe I'm seeing things too much as from a perspective of black and white, right? And you can even say that should the situation be different, I might even do evil acts should circumstances be evil, right? So if, let's say, using the previous example of A, U, and B, if somebody puts a gun to my head and tells me to shoot B, or A would shoot me, yeah, I'll probably would shoot B as well. But the whole idea is that I wouldn't try to kid myself to think that like, well, I'm still such a pure, nice, good person. I would just face the fact that like, well, I'm evil person, I've done an evil act, and should punishment comes for me, then I fully deserve the punishment, and there's no way for me, or rather I don't feel like, I should skirt the punishment in some sense. And in some sense you can say that that's a point in itself, right? A lot of this rationalization is the whole idea of skirting punishment. And you can say that punishment comes in terms of the punishment from the law, but again, a lot of punishment, whenever it comes down to a human mind, and by the way, this is what works on the principle of reciprocation, is the punishment comes in terms of our guilt and our conscience. So guilt is the emotion that is basically signified, or rather basically describes the feeling of I deserve to be punished. And I'll go as far to actually say that if somebody is depressed, the reason why they walk off the edge is not because of the depression or because of the sadness. It's because of the emotion of guilt. You can say that like, the reason why if somebody were to lose their job and they get depressed because of that, and they have family members to feed, then you can say that like, well, I'm such a piece of shit, and if I weren't a piece of shit, I wouldn't have lost my job, and because of that, I deserve to be punished because I'm not good enough for my family members, and it's that line of thought that makes them walk off the edge. But is that a rational line of thinking? No, it's not, because again, we're talking in terms of emotion, we're talking in terms of guilt, right? It's just something that human beings, we trick ourselves into doing. But the whole idea is that the way I see it, the reason why people walk off the edge is not because of other emotions such as sadness, because sadness is a passive emotion. It causes you to do nothing. The action emotions tend to be things such as anger, and in this case, guilt, right? Guilt causes you to say that, okay, I must do something to right this wrong, and one of the way for me to right the wrong is for me to forfeit my life, which again, it's nonsensical the way that I see it, right? Because it doesn't work on the principle of logic. But I don't want to deviate too much. I want to go back to the example, right? So this way of deserving can also be seen in one way. So from one perspective, we are now seeing in terms of, okay, somebody have hurt us, and I justify this by doing things that hurt others. At this point, we can probably see it as like, okay, this is nonsensical, and you can't really justify things in this way, right? And if we were to see a guy who got rejected by a girl, and the guy goes off and finds some ways to hurt the girl, be it destroy her property or ruin her reputation or anything like this, we'll see the guy as, well, this person is a psycho. But what we actually mean by this person is a psycho is that, well, this person is not a good person. Essentially, it's just different ways of explaining the same thing. But in some sense, you can even say that, well, this is still not that bad, right? Because, well, somebody have hurt you, and then, well, you're just taking revenge, so I can sort of understand that. So why is this thing still swirling in my mind, and why does it bother me so much? It's because the sense of deserving, or rather, like in this case, like the principle of deserving, rationalizes evil to the level of, if at some point I perceive somebody to have more than me, you can say that an imbalance have already been created. So going back to the scale, on one point, we are talking in terms of somebody have actively done something to us, and therefore we are doing something in return, which cannot be it's not a good justification. And you can say that the person is wrong, but in some sense, yes, I can sort of still understand that. Without condoning or condemning, I can sort of understand that. But the second part, which I feel like it's actually the core of evil itself, is the idea of passive deserving. And in this sense, you can say that so long as I think that I have less than another person, it justifies me doing certain acts that might be deemed as evil or bare minimum not good. What do I mean? If somebody is better looking than us, you can say in terms of like, well, did this person deserve natural beauty? Did this person do anything to deserve this? No, right? You can even say that like, okay, I might have to even put in extremely or substantially more effort to try to be good looking, and yet this person is effortlessly being good looking because of that. And because of that, it is unfair. Again, when we are talking in terms of unfair, it's going to the idea of deserving, right? And because of that, it feels as though universally something have been wrong. There is an offset. So if there's anything that happened to this person that is negative in nature, so for example, if let's say they get into an accident, in some sense, part of us in our heart will feel like, wow, that's karma. That's karma. Which, by the way, karma, a lot of people thinks in terms of like that's only from a positive way, right? So for example, if you do good, you get good. If you do bad, you get bad. And we see this as a universally good trait. You can see in this sense that karma right now can actually be used to warp the perception in that way, right? Which is, well, this person just have more, right? It's karma that this person got all these things. Like, who is this person to get better grades or something like that, right? So if you're talking in terms of intelligence, there are going to be people who understands things much better than us without any sort of effort. And then we'll see it from the perspective of like, I work so hard to study and I can't even get the same results as this person who potentially don't even study. Then like this is completely nonsense, this is completely unfair. So if this person would be run over by a car, I feel like that's completely justified, right? Or even in some situation, think in terms of this, if let's say we are talking in terms of real life application, right? Imagine that you follow let's say an entertainer or something like this, right? We're talking in terms of maybe K-pop, could be a case, although I don't really follow K-pop, so I have to basically infer. But I imagine there's probably going to be a situation where if a scandal were to happen and this person and this girl or guy have been implicated and people dislike this person because of the scandal itself, then you can say that there's going to be a subset of people that's going to feel a certain sense of emotional or moral superiority that like, yes, I'm glad that this person is going through whatever they are going through right now, because of course they don't think in terms of the because, right? All they have is the emotional satisfaction, but the whole idea is because, well, they have more than me, they are richer than me, they are more good looking than me, and etc. And the reason why I feel like this whole framework is so hypocritical is because when the scales is tipped in our favor, we think everything is justified. So what do I mean in this case? I think there's a very common viewpoint that, or rather I would say that, okay, why is the world so screwed up right now is because, well, money have been inflated to no end, right? And the reason why money is inflated is because there's a group of people who have a lot of money and all of us have very little. And you can say that in order for somebody to be rich, other people have to be poor, because if everybody is rich, the terminology of rich loses all meaning. So the whole idea is that if let's say I'm rich and I'm controlling aspects of the economy, I have to keep people poor in order for me to stay rich. Sensible, because like if let's say they are rich, then like I would cease to be rich. And you can even say that the way I control resources and the way that I can get first claims on resources is for people not to have the purchasing power, because if everybody have the same purchasing power, then I have to fight other people just for a loaf of bread. So you can say that there's incentive for people to do so, and because of that, people see this structure and they see it as, well, one of the way for us to fix the issues of the world right now is that we redistribute wealth. So we take the money from the rich and then we redistribute to everybody. But I also see it from the perspective of, yeah, you'll say that right now because the idea is that you see yourself as the person that the money should be redistributed to. Now, what if in this situation, you are the person who's rich? Right now, you are the person who's rich and now you have all the money and everybody is coming after you to redistribute. Probably the person who is rich is going to think about it this way. I did not get my wealth because of nothing. I have to put in effort. So for example, this is money, right? This is money. I have to put in the amount of effort to get this money. I have to sacrifice time with my family members. I don't know my children. I don't know my wife. My wife is probably out cheating on me because I don't pay any attention to her because I'm such a successful CEO that I need to focus on my work 24/7, and she's probably after my money anyway, right? She's gonna find some way to divorce me, etc., etc. But I have to sacrifice so many things. I sacrifice hours of sleep because, again, CEOs, if they don't work extremely hard, there's gonna be a younger, more ambitious guy that's be willing to take over him and basically kick him out of the company, right? So everybody is after his throat to a certain extent. So you can say that like the CEO is gonna think in terms of I sacrifice so much thing, my time, my money, to a certain extent, my life, life can also comes down to life quality, right? So in that sense, I'm sacrificing the time with my children, and because of that, it balances the scale. If I'm unable to get like the family life and everything like this, then at the very least I have money. And you can even say that this CEO will justify taking everything from you mainly because you have family love, you have the time with your children, you have all the things, etc., etc. And because of that, it justifies him. He doesn't have that, right? So how dare you have more than him? It justifies him doing evil acts. So again, you can see that with this framework of just deserving alone, right? You can reframe so much evilness, and I think that the one key word when it comes down to this is always the idea of justice. So if we think in terms of justice, what exactly is justice, right? Is justice righting a wrong, or is justice about creating equality? If the idea is justice is righting a wrong, and in actual fact you can think in terms of like regardless of what it is, the outcome of justice being served is to balance the scale. And because of that, people will be able to justify their evil acts using the idea of, well, what I'm doing is actually righteous, what I'm doing is actually justice in itself. So anyway, to me, because this framework can be used to justify so many things, to me, I really truly do feel that, well, this is the root of evil itself. This is why, there's so many evil acts in the world. And of course, another thing to ask is that, well, now that you know this, then what do you actually do about it? What can you actually do about it? Well, again, for the reason why I think about a lot of things in terms of psychology and everything is always coming down to the idea of understanding. To understand human, right? In some sense, be it from the direction of judgment, which most of the time is not going to be from the direction of judgment, it's going to be from the direction of understanding. I mean, in some sense, you can say that it helps me sleep better at night, knowing that, like, well, people are not really evil because of evil itself. Although it kind of contradicts what I'm saying, right? Because what I'm saying is that people by nature is actually evil, and they're finding all this way to actually try to color themselves as not evil. Which, by the way, I just remember good things before I close this, which is 42 minutes already. I did remember the last three things. The last three things is of higher purpose. Which, again, the core of this lesson, or rather the core of this idea of how do we justify evil, it always stems to deserving, right? Because, again, deserving, you can start to think and you can start to notice, well, what are the things that we see in life right now that people are using deserving to actually justify certain actions, such as like hate, right? For me to actually go out of my way to say something hurtful to another person, to hate this person, or to actually slander this person, what is the thing that they truly did? Of course, human mind have a way to actually find like any vague reasoning, right? You can say that what happens first is the emotion. The emotion of this is not fair and this person should get hurt comes before any sort of reasoning. So whenever something happens, such as the scandal, then like that's when the human mind goes, you see, I knew it. Nobody knew it before me, but I knew it. This person is bad, therefore this person did the scandal. Good that this person is now being punished. The world is again now in imbalance. Which honestly, if it can't be told, or rather, you can't tell from this, I think this line of thinking is truly disgusting, right? Truly disgusting, and this is one of the reasons why I feel like, in some sense, the human animal is so flawed. As much as I learn about it, but there's so many weakness and there's so many hypocrisy and there's so many things that doesn't make sense. But in any case, I'm just gonna end off this with higher purpose. Right, this is gonna be the final point that I touch on. Higher purpose essentially is that for me to justify evil acts is because I'm doing this for a higher purpose, right? Be it morality, for the sake of morality or anything like this. The easiest way is from religion, right? So you can say that like, well, I'm gonna do this certain act because of religion, and it tracks all the way back to the early religion, right? So if let's say we are talking in terms of crusades, if you think in terms of, well, what you're actually doing is that you're sieging cities, and again, after you siege the cities, because of the evilness of human beings will pillage. They won't siege the city, own the cities, and gonna be like, okay, well, we're just here to liberate you, and again, like, you guys can do whatever you want, we are gentlemen over here. No, the thing about human nature is that we are always doing things for our own benefit, and obviously when war happens, when they siege, they break into the city, then what they tend to do is they tend to pillage and loot and take everything for their own purpose. Because you can even say that like, well, I sacrificed so hard and I fought and bled, so many people have died for this, I deserve to get something out of this. So again, going back to deserving, right? So you can even say that they justify the pillaging through deserving. But again, the act of them even starting the siege in itself is for higher purpose, right? Because the whole idea is that, well, I'm doing this for religion, right? I'm doing this for my belief, for my deity and everything like this. And you can even say that with this higher purpose, again, there's a lot of different ways for us to justify evil acts, which in my opinion, there's no such justification of, well, this evil act, I'm doing this for certain reasons. If the act itself is evil, or if you're doing things right, evil is evil. There's no separation. But again, I understand that no, I'm not the judge, jury, and executioner whenever it comes to this, right? It always comes down to, well, we have to get our certain sense of peace, be it through your belief system or be it through finding meaning in your life, regardless of what type of person you are. Important thing is that so long as you can sleep at night, right? And you can even say that like, well, all these things is gonna help you sleep like a baby at night, because otherwise then you're gonna have guilt, and once you have guilt, then well, it's a big problem, because guilt is a truly problematic emotion that I would say that is the most dangerous emotion that a human being can potentially feel. But in any case, I'll end off over here. Of course, I didn't touch on too much about higher purpose, because again, I don't want to drag the video to be extremely long. And you can also say that, well, probably it's because I don't have as much point, I don't have as much emotional attachment to the whole idea of higher purpose as much as I have when it comes to deserving, right? Because deserving creates such a high level of disgust in me that I feel like, wow, there's so many points that I want to share. But in any case, I'm quite interested in what you actually think in terms of this. Again, if there's anything that you feel like, okay, you haven't considered this, or even straight up, you're wrong in this, or like, this, or any other points, or even if you find any other good points, right, that, hey, actually human being also justify certain acts because of this other principle, or like we also use this other principle to actually justify evil acts, then feel free to let me know. I'm also very curious to actually find out. So in any case, I'll see you in the next one. Probably what I'll be touching on is not as doomer as this, right? I'm not going to be touching on doomer subjects all the time. I'll probably be something along the line of attraction. And now that I shared on how love and infatuation actually work, probably the next thing I'll share is that how in a process of two person falling in love with each other, how does attraction actually work, right? So in order for me to attract the other person, for the other person to be attracted to me, what is the things that is required? So if it's something that you're interested in, then probably the next video will be something that you'll enjoy. Alright, see you.